From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. On Monday, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro said his country will send a document to Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, demanding the United States to stop its threats. Maduro says a national document declaring the threats by the United States illegal will be signed by 10 million Venezuelans. He took direct aim at Trump while declaring that the armed forces stand ready to defend the country. Venezuela's leader says his country is facing an unprecedented threat.
Continuous rebellion. We will start with a national day with a core document addressed to the people of the United States and to President Donald Trump. A document demanding him to withdraw all the threats of intervention. A document demanding the respect of the constitutionality and legality of the life in Venezuela. A document demanding the respect of international law. And we are going to have it signed starting on Wednesday by at least 10 million Venezuelans. We are going to sign the document that we are going to bring to the White House of the United States demanding respect. To speak about war in the 21st century, it's nonsense, Mr. Trump. To even think that you are going to send your army to this country that has people who will defend it, because there are men and women in Venezuela that under any circumstance will march against this inhuman thoughts.
And in an interview with RT, President Maduro has vowed not to betray his country, saying he won't give in to Washington's calls.
I do not care how I'm going to go down in history. I'm not going to be a traitor, a weak one, like a one who turned his back on his history commitments to his people.
President Maduro also said that Donald Trump is calling for a coup in Venezuela in order to get his hands on the country's vast natural resources.
I take advantage of every means of communication to ask the whole world to come forward to denounce and stop the madness of Donald Trump. Venezuela is never going to give in.
Earlier we spoke with British journalist Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos to discuss the latest developments of the political situation in Venezuela.
And let me tell you something about Juan Guaido. This man, who has no legal or electoral legitimacy, would be the person who, God forbid, if he ever became president of Venezuela, he would surrender Venezuela's independence to America. He would turn Venezuela into a client state of America. That is the difference between Nicolas Maduro, who is a true patriot of Venezuela, and Juan Guaido, who would give Venezuela on a golden platter to the Americans. Absolutely, the parallels are striking. What does Syria, for example, and Iran, for example, and Venezuela, for example, have in common? Well, they are independent sovereign countries who pursue independent foreign policies, who will not surrender their independence to the Americans, who will not bow down to the diktats from Washington. And therein lies the reason why the Americans tried to overthrow the Syrian government and they failed. And therein lies the reason why the Americans are targeting not just Venezuela, but Iran.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has slammed the United States and the European Union for trying to oust President Maduro's government.
We know now what the EU is, what kind of democracy it is. On one hand, you say democracy, and ballot box. And on the other, you will, through violence and rules, overthrow an elected government. Is Venezuela one of your states? How dare you tell an elected person to leave and deliver the head of state to the one who did not even run in the elections?
On Monday, President Maduro also spoke against the interventionist attempts by the Lima Group.
As the Lima cartel has attempted to do against the Bolivarian revolution, against the Bolivarian government of Venezuela and all the left wing, against all the progressive sectors. A real inquisition has been imposed for politics, moral, and ideology in international countries that are governed by the Lima cartel.
His comments follow a meeting of the so-called Lima Group held in Ottawa, Canada on Monday, where they discussed the political situation in Venezuela. That meeting was interrupted by protesters. Two women unfolded a banner and chanted "Hands off Venezuela" in reference to Canada's recognition of the Venezuelan opposition lawmaker who declared himself interim president. The protesters were escorted away by security. Protests also took place in 5 different Canadian cities against the meeting which was being held in Ottawa. These are images from Toronto in front of the offices of Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland. The message was clear: hands off Venezuela, no sanctions, no coups. And a small demonstration was also held in Vancouver, British Columbia, on the other side of the country. The group of Canadians say that they disapprove their government's foreign meddling. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. On Monday, a protest was held in New York in front of the offices of U.S. mission to the United Nations, demanded that Washington stop intervention in internal affairs of Venezuela.
So they're such hypocrites because they're talking about a coup d'etat, the sanctions against Venezuela, a possible coup. They're directly interfering in Venezuelan affairs. I mean, disinvestment, capital flight by the rich in Venezuela. A lot of people don't know the causes of the poverty and the problems that Venezuela is having. When you don't want to play ball with U.S. corporations, the U.S. is going to attack you one way or another. Economically, they'll even resort to violence.
And what they are trying to do in Venezuela is indicative of them being against the government. Although what they are trying to do is unprecedented, to have a coup d'etat with the president still present. That's unprecedented, but that is indicative of them being very vigorous gangsters. They are a gangster government.
Economic, political, and hopefully not military intervention of the United States has created many difficulties for the people of the world, in Venezuela, in Latin America, in the Caribbean, in Africa, and Asia as well. In all parts of the world, the position of the imposition of the United States and their choice of government. This always results in the people being more poor, more disenfranchised, and with an even more difficult struggle for justice.
A press investigation called Rehenes has revealed new information about the murder of the Ecuadorian journalist from the newspaper El Comercio and their driver last year. Our correspondent from Ecuador, Denise Herrera, has the details.
A new report has revealed several irregularities in the newly declassified information by the Ecuadorian government concerning the murders of the team of the Comercio newspaper at the border with Colombia. Their relatives have questioned the details released by the government about the time of the kidnapping and secret military operations between Colombia and Ecuador that might have led to the deaths of their journalists.
Ecuadorian authorities and the Attorney General Office believe that Paul, Javier, and Efrain crossed the border without the knowledge of military. But Rehenes, as well as other documents and media investigations, has revealed that the military knew of the journalists' movements and that the group had authorization to cross the border.
The relatives have confirmed that several investigations showed that the government was negotiating the release of the commercial staff. They have called on the Attorney General to carry out an investigation in order to bring justice to the plotters of the murder.
The Rehenes investigation has interviewed some former members of the group that kidnapped the journalist, as well as other people, and found that the journalist's release was planned, or at least there was correspondence between the criminals and the government within the first 24 hours of the kidnapping. It was not the intention of the criminal group to stay with the abducted group for very long, meaning the kidnappers had realized their mistake.
The relatives have also called President Lenin Moreno to reveal the truth of their deaths. They add that it seems the government wants to close the case as soon as possible, but suddenly different questions are now put on the table.
Was
their release not convenient for them? For whom were the murders convenient? So they couldn't reveal information or the things that they may have learned whilst they were detained? For whom is the death for alias Guacho actually convenient?
The relatives say they will go to several international courts to prove the government lies and in pursuit of justice. They will also ask the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to link the new report in their investigation that will be published in March. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
Now to Brazil, where the Workers' Party will propose a bill at Congress for immediate closure of upstream mining waste dams across the country. Workers' Party Congressman Rogério Correia from Minas Gerais states, where the Vale Dam disaster happened, is said to present a bill that will close all mining waste dams that use the upstream method. This is the cheapest but also the least safe dam design. It comes after a state court ordered the company Vale to stop using 8 upstream waste dams.
Os rejeitos, enfim, fazer com que a barragem não funcione mais. O prazo.
A total of 130 people died in Brazil after a dam collapsed in the city of Brumadinho. 200 people are still missing. André Beira has more.
Recovery efforts continue in the city of Brumadinho after a dam collapsed and left, up until now, 134 dead and almost 200 missing. Experts are alert to the possible emergence of illnesses due to the collapse. Let's recall that in 2015, another dam owned by the same company, Vale, collapsed, leading to the spread of diseases like yellow fever. It means there's a huge risk to well-being after the disaster in Brumadinho. Meanwhile, social movements have asked for special attention to be paid to other dams that are in the same situation as the Mariana Dam that collapsed in 2015 and that which broke this year. The situation is very complicated and the consequences are severe. Many of these mining companies pose a risk to the citizens of Brazil. Back to you.
We thank André for that report. The number of homeless people in Argentina's capital, Buenos Aires, has increased as the economic situation in the country worsens. Let's hear more in this report.
Every day, the number of families sleeping on the streets multiplies as they have no resources to rent a house. This is just one of the most visible consequences of the economic crisis. 2 out of 10 residents in Buenos Aires are poor.
We need to analyze and take into account the political situation and the austerity measures launched by the government. They are affecting the most vulnerable people in Argentinian society.
It's a question of political will. This government wants the rich to be richer and the poor to be poorer. This government wants to keep social differences. So the son of a poor worker will also be a poor worker, and the son of a rich businessman will also be a rich businessman.
The number of people living in misery went from 100,000 in 2015 to 188,000 in 2018. It is estimated that 23.6% of them became homeless in less than a year. Poverty reaches 639,000 people, 21% of the population in the richest area of the country.
The government is not sensitive at all. There have been people sleeping in front of the government buildings for some time now, but nobody cares. There are families with children, pets, with all their belongings that are homeless. You can see they are new poor because they live at the streets but have their mobile phones.
Well, 10% of the population lives in extreme poverty. Almost 2.5 million Argentinians have no access to basic food. The social gap keeps widening. The richest get 1/3 of the income, 31.8%, while the poorest just get 1.7%.
This leads to many premature deaths, pensioners who cannot get their medicines. And the worst part is the government talking about Venezuela instead of what's going on here. The mainstream media remain silent as they are aligned to the financial power.
The hard situation poor people face is getting more visible in the city, where the social gap keeps increasing. The number of people living in poverty has sharply increased in the last year. The figures are clear: 30.5 million people in the country are poor.
Time for a second break. More news in a minute. Welcome back. The Russian envoy to Iran has said that the two countries will stop using the United States dollar in their bilateral trade agreements. He made the statement ahead of a meeting between President Vladimir Putin and his Iranian counterpart Hassan Rouhani. U.S. sanctions have made the use of dollar-focused financial systems more difficult, even for trade that isn't with the United States. Instead, they will use Russian or Iranian currency. And Russia's defense minister is extending the range of its land-based missile systems in response to the U.S. withdrawal from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said the U.S. is also developing land-based missiles with a longer range. The treaty banned ground-launched missiles with ranges of 500 to 5,500 kilometers. Morocco is once again trying to end the long-running diplomatic spat with Algeria, but can all differences between the two states can be settled? Our correspondent in South Africa, Matuba Matiche, provides some insight.
King Mohammed of Morocco has extended an olive branch to his country's longtime rival, Algeria. He was quoted in a speech this week referring to Algeria as a sister country that he was willing to renew ties with. And this week's speech is by no means new, because the king has been asking for reconciliation for a while. Now, the rift between the two countries stems from an ideological and political difference when it comes to the issue of Western Sahara. That is a disputed territory bordering Morocco, Algeria, and Mauritania, but largely controlled by Morocco, which is a problem with Algeria. Morocco insists that the resource-rich territory is an integral part of its kingdom, but Algeria has hit back by supporting the Sahrawi Nationalist Polisario Front, who are seeking self-determination in that part of the world. Now, Morocco has had its fair share of diplomatic spats on the same issue. And this time I'll tell you about South Africa. But King Mohammed somehow managed to get South Africa to end a 13-year-old spat. It's unclear if South Africa changed its mind or its stance on the issue, but Algeria seems to not be down on getting Western Sahara as a separate state from Morocco. So I'll use the cliche and say it remains to be seen if efforts of countries like Tunisia will help ease tensions so Algiers and Rabat can restore ties. It's back to you.
We thank Matuba for that report. Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo has called for collaboration in the mining sector to boost African development. Speaking at a mining conference in South Africa, he said collaboration between mining companies and government across the continent can make Africa prosperous. The president added that it was deplorable that African minerals benefit other countries more than local people.
Africa has made the world rich with our minerals. Our gemstones adorn crowns and homes around the world. It is time to make Africa prosperous and enable her people to attain a dignified standard of living. Join us in this exciting project for sustainable economic growth.
The leaders of 5 countries which call themselves the G5 Sahel had met in Burkina Faso for a summit in the fight against jihadism in the region. The one-day meeting aims at reinforcing coordination in the battle against jihadists, who have killed hundreds of civilians and inflicted crippling economic damage in the Sahel. The meeting takes place a day after a fresh terror attack in the region claimed 14 lives. South Africa's ruling African National Congress has said it will not condone what it called slave and master relations with Western governments. The statement follows reports that 5 countries led by the United Kingdom and United States sent a letter to President Cyril Ramaphosa warning that of need of a stronger commitment to the rule of law. The parties said South Africa is a sovereign country and Western countries must give the government space to run the country.
On what we
Meanwhile, South Africa's election season is in full swing, with political parties competing for votes. This is the country's 5th election since the country's first democratic elections in 1994.
We want jobs now, we are hungry now, we want to eat now. That's why our message is very simple.
The countdown to what is dubbed the most contentious election has started. The radical far-left Economic Freedom Fighters, a breakaway party of the ruling ANC, says it's now business unusual and is promising to eradicate the high unemployment rate, chief among many social ills. The campaign rally took place in the country's capital.
They live in a capital city, yet they still have pit toilets. How can you have pit toilets in a capital city?
It says the legacy of apartheid is standing in the way of emancipation of the disadvantaged black people. He adds that corruption in the state security agencies made the situation even worse.
We must expose corrupt police who are working with drug lords here in Soshanguve, in Western Cape, in Northern Cape, and in all areas where we have problems of drugs.
Political commentators say the EFF, with only 6% of the national vote from the previous election, will not unseat the governing party, but will certainly continue to challenge the traditional politics. They say the priority for anyone who will be in the seat of government come May this year is addressing inequality.
If you want people to think of themselves as living in one country, of having the same sense of identity and being, we know that that happens in those societies where there is greater equality. So in places like Sweden and Denmark and Finland and Iceland, it's not just that the populations are what many people think of as homogeneous, is that they're also economically equal. And these societies were very poor and unequal 100 years ago. South Africa has had 25 years since its independence from and liberation from apartheid, and yet, far from becoming more equal, it has in some senses become even more unequal.
The Economic Freedom Fighters is also not the biggest political party in this country, but an important player in political landscape, putting pressure on the ruling ANC to deliver on its promises from when Nelson Mandela became the first black democratically elected president. Matiwa Mahlachi, Telesur, Pretoria.
Thousands of martial artists and other performers have opened the Year of the Pig in China with a mesmerizing spring festival gala show. 2019 is the Year of the Pig, one of 12-year cycle of animals in the Chinese zodiac. It is believed to be a symbol of optimism, enthusiasm, and hard work. In China, millions of people have traveled to their hometowns in the largest annual human migration. Since its first broadcast in 1983, the Spring Gala show has become a national tradition on the Lunar New Year Eve. Citizens of North Korea have also celebrated the Lunar New Year in the capital Pyongyang. People paid their respects and laid flowers in front of the statues of their leaders, while children played traditional games. And with this story, we come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.